possible barrier I could have had was myself and my mind and my thoughts and fear, because I'll kid you not, this was the scariest thing I've ever did in my life. And even up until the day I was leaving, like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, am I making a good decision or what have you? But I did it anyway. And that really, it was life changing in so many different ways, life saving in so many different ways, right? And so I feel like getting out of the belief or fear factor, I feel, is the biggest part. Whether you decide that you want to just go somewhere new, do an extended stay. I mean, you don't have to move. You could do like an extended stay, or even just visit, whatever it is. I think getting past that fear factor. And unfortunately, there are different things that play on that fear factor. Like when I moved, the US had just upgraded Jamaica travel advisory. I think it was like a level 3, level 4, whatever. And so I was like, oh, shoot. So I texted my friends down here. I'm like, they was like, it's fine. And so I think getting past that fear factor is huge.
Today, I want to talk with a beautiful young lady who figured out the American dream is a lie. And so she decided to go off to Jamaica and get some sun and get with some of her people. So today we're going to talk with the lovely Tiffany Grant. She's been on before. She's a friend of mine, a friend to the show. But she moved, y'all. She left America and went to Jamaica. So I wanted to talk to her about that today. So let's welcome in Tiffany. Hey, Tiffany.
Hey, Kamari. Thank you so much for having me again.
Good. I always love our conversations.
We always go in depth with a lot of things, so I'm excited.
We have
to be
real
here.
Conversations. Yes, we do. Yes. So everybody that's watching, Tiffany's a superstar. She hates it when I say that, but I'm never going to stop. But recently, she was highlighted on CNBC, and they talked to her about her new travels, relocation to Jamaica Mine. I don't know if that's bad or not, but I'm actually jealous because I actually want to be an expat someday. And you're going to start seeing me interview more people who I know who live abroad, travel abroad a lot, because America ain't American no more, y'all. It actually probably never did, but
I'm like, when did it ever? What did I miss?
Yeah, like, when was it ever great? But, here we are. So, Tiff, you, again, were highlighted on CNBC's. I'm going to bring it up real quick. You were highlighted on CNBC. What brought that about?
Yeah, so I guess long story short, and this is why I say it's very important for my business owners to send emails to their newsletter, letting them, to their subscribers, letting them know what's going on. I sent an email newsletter one week, and lo and behold, the editor that I've worked with previously was still on my list. And she was like, oh, Tiffany, this sounds like a good story. Can you write about it for us? And that's how that article, the first article, came about. And then when I wrote the first article, she was like, I'm going to take this part out and we can do this as a second article. And so that's kind of how that happened.
Wait a minute. There's 2 articles? Oh, yeah. I'm not a good friend. I'm sorry. I didn't know that. So,
yeah.
Okay.
So if you click on my name, where it says Tiffany Grant Contributor, it'll pop up with both of them. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to come to it, but 33-year-old mom, I left the U.S. to live 10 minutes from the beach in Jamaica for $1,900 a month. I could not be happier. Is that a flex? Was that a flex? I live 10 minutes from the beach.
Yeah, unintentional flex, but it's the truth, and don't get me wrong, I'm from North Carolina, and I wasn't that far from the beach in North Carolina, maybe about 3-4 hours, right? However, I do feel like the 10-minute drive to the beach road and the grill it's much better, and the beach is better too.
What we talking about? You ain't got to justify that. We already know what it is. All right, so for those who don't know you, Tiff, who are you and why did you go to Jamaica?
Yeah, so my name is Tiffany Grant and I run Money Talk with Tiff, which is a financial and business education blog and podcast. I moved to Jamaica because, well, I just love it, first of all, but when I was visiting, every time I would go out the country, I would go to Jamaica. And I just fell in love from the first time I went. Now, the history though is my dad is Jamaican. And so I do have roots here, technically. But it wasn't until 2022 when I came to Jamaica for the first time, and I had to bogart my way into that trip with my aunt. But after I did that, I just felt like home. Like I said, this is where I want to be. And then when earlier this year, so I would say about February, started really putting the pieces together, because when I came down the first time in 2022, I stayed for a month and I realized I'm like, I can still do what I'm doing here. So make it make sense. Like, why am I still there? And so I had to have my daughter because I was pregnant at that time, had my daughter, all of that. And then this year was when I started really seriously thinking about how to make it happen.
That's wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. So clearly you have roots there. Your auntie went there. Your dad's from there. But I'm guessing you don't have a super strong connection there because that was your first time there, right?
Right, exactly. So where I live, which is in Negril, I don't have any family here. My family's not from here. And when I came in 2022, I only met one family member. And so I don't really know my family here like that. However, I do plan on changing that, as time
Got
goes
to. You
on.
got to. Okay.
Absolutely. Because I feel, from my other side, my mom is a genealogist. So I've always known my history, my family history on that side. And so for me, it's just super important to know your roots and where you come from and things like that. So I definitely plan on doing more on this side.
Okay. Now, I know you said you fell in love with the place, but what was it about it that you fell in love with?
Mm. Yeah. So where do I start? How long do we have? No. But we can.
You're always welcome to come back.
Right. We can start with the people, right? So the people here are wonderful. Of course, with everywhere, there's bad apples everywhere. However, the majority of people that I come across with here, it's more of that community feel, and that for me is what's missing in the States. Everybody in the States is individualistic and things like that, and it's not just Jamaica, because I've been to Africa and other places. Everywhere I've been, it's more community oriented and community based than what you would experience in the States, and just that alone is just, it just makes you feel like you're a part of something. You don't feel like you're invisible. Like, people know me, like my whole lane knows me. When I was in the States, I only knew like 4 or 5 of my neighbors, right? And I lived there for 7 years in my house. And here I moved in like a week. I knew everybody,
So did they come introduce yourselves or did you go introduce yourself?
So how that started was, I used to have a mango tree in my yard, which I called the community mango tree. Unfortunately, Beryl took it out when the hurricane came through. But everybody would come to that mango tree and get some mangoes. They'd be like, "Hey, can we come get some mangoes?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." Because I'm not going to eat hundreds of mangoes that the tree is producing. So anyway, that gave me opportunity to get to know my neighbors, get to know. And then not only that, as soon as I came in, that's one thing about Jamaicans. They're very curious and they're very inquisitive and intuitive. And so as soon as I came, of course, everybody wants to know, who is this, who they move, whatever. And so people just came and introduced themselves, even when I'm walking. So the custom here is you always greet. So, whether it's good morning, good afternoon, good night, you always greet people. And so when I'm walking to the store, walking up the street, good afternoon, good morning, good night, whatever. And then another custom here is that people just sit and talk. Like, it's not the hustle and bustle of, that we're used to in the US. It's like, I call it island time, where everybody's just chill. And, even when I hire people to come, right? Like I have a housekeeper, we sit and talk for hours, and it's okay and it's fine. It's not like everybody's in a rush, and you actually build those genuine connections. So community, but then also food. Now, here is what I have learned in my experience. The US food is either salty, too sweet, or full of chemicals. And I learned that.
To be specific, are we talking US Jamaican / Caribbean cuisine, or are you talking in general?
In general. And here's when I started realizing that. Before I moved, I was having health issues, right? So I was having high blood pressure, the usual in the US. Everybody's on medicine for something, right? And so for me, it was high blood pressure. And I came to Jamaica to visit, right? And mind you, this high blood pressure thing I was dealing with, it was swelling, like it was a lot. And I was seeing specialists and all types of stuff, and nobody could figure out what was going on. I came to Jamaica for the first time in February of this year, in February. And I forgot to take my blood pressure medicine, and I didn't take it the whole time I was here, which was like 2 to 3 weeks, right? So when I went back to the States, I had a doctor's appointment with my heart doctor, and they were like, "Oh, it looks like the medicine is working." And I was like, I haven't taken that medicine in over a month now. And so it made me realize that it's something in the US that's killing people. And I've come to the conclusion that part of it is food. And the reason I came to that conclusion is because, true story, I just got back from the US maybe about a week or so ago. And since I've been gone for so long, my taste buds have adjusted, and everything, I mean, stuff I used to tear up when I used to live there, everything was salty or sweet or tasted like chemicals, or just generally not good. Like I've went to restaurants where I used to go to business meetings all the time, and all types of stuff, and it just did not taste the same. Also, the grocery stores. So you might think it's safe shopping at the grocery store or whatever. Just stay on the outside. Get your produce, meats, whatever. Right. As soon as I landed this last time, I said, well, I know I'm not going to eat fast food. That's for sure. Let me go to the grocery store. Everything in the grocery store is supersized. So the onions here are maybe about that big. In the US, they're like this big. The bananas are not as massive as they are in the US. So even the produce is huge. And I was just like, this is interesting. Just seeing the differences between the two after I've been gone for so long.
GMOs, baby. GMOs. Yeah.
And it had less taste. That's another thing too. So not only are things supersized, they also don't taste as good.
Now that's interesting. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're talking about the size of everything in there. Portion. I'm assuming portion sizes are smaller. Food smaller. What about the money? Because somebody said something to me not too long ago. He said, everything's easier when you live abroad, when you have American money. So do you think that's true? I mean, is there a big difference when you lived in Jamaica with American money, or do you think you'll be fine either way?
No, I think that is a huge thing. And that's what I tell people when they're thinking about moving here. If there's a way that you can make American money and then move here, it would be better. So, I've been running my business since 2017 and full time since 2019. So I was well established before I moved here. However, for instance, the locals here, the pay is not good. And especially if you're an expat, so someone that's not a Jamaican national, it's going to be hard or difficult to find a job because how their law is set up, they favor Jamaican nationals first for
Right.
any opportunities.
Makes sense.
So it makes sense. So as an expat, and that's why most expats here are retired or they're digital nomads, because that's how you can afford the type of, and I'm not even gonna say the type of life, because I like this life better, way more simple, but just remotely close to what you're used to. You're gonna need that.
Nice. Okay. So when I move abroad, I need to make sure I got my American money set up. Now, it's funny because the first time I went to the DR, Dominican Republic, they talked about island time. Everything is much slower there. But I was able to go there. I went there earlier this year in February. It was tax season, the height of tax season, and I was still able to work. Now, I know the idea of going on vacation is not to work, but it was tax season. So I had to make some concessions. And I'll be honest, I very much enjoyed working in the paradise than working home in my home office. So I might have to follow your footsteps somewhere.
Right. And like I told you before we hit record, like I sit outside of my veranda literally all day, every day. And I joke and say that's my office. So like when my neighbors come by, I'd be like, oh, welcome to my office, or what have you. But it's just, and okay, so here's number 3. I know we kind of went off on a tangent, but here's number 3, the stress. The stress, it's like there's an environmental stress in America that I don't experience here. And it was even more clear to me when I was up there visiting last week or the week before, whatever week it was. There's so much that is happening all around you in America that just doesn't happen here. So whether it's rushing to this, to do that, rushing to a meeting, rushing to do this, or media, I'm since I live here, I don't really plug into media, US media like that, really any media, honestly, except, social media. But it's like once you unplug and then you go back, you realize how plugged in everybody is, if that makes sense.
Right. I get it.
So that was eye-opening too. And that environment is stressful in of itself. And I felt myself like as soon as I was about to deboard the plane, like that's how bad it is. Everybody started trying to rush to deboard the plane. And I'm just like, and then I started getting into the mindset, oh, I got to do this. Oh, I got to make sure I go to this event and do all these things. And I said, wait a minute, Tiffany, you don't do this when you're back home. Like you just go with the flow, whatever happens, happens. But now you're starting to get into that environment, and that environment is starting to seep into how you're living your life. And I was like, yeah, I can't do that. So I had to consciously not do that while I was there. But it was so easy to get sucked in to that lifestyle.
So sticking with the money, what is the most surprising thing you're experiencing there? Whether it's the food, the cost of food, utilities, housing, what's the one thing that's you were really shocked by?
Okay, I'll name 2 things: the cost of food and the cost of school. So I moved with 2 of my kids, so my 10-year-old and my 1-year-old. And school here is expensive because, in the US, you're used to school buses, free transportation. Depending on your neighborhood, maybe free meals. Where we lived, they got free lunch and everything at school, free books, and you usually just have to pay for school supplies and clothes. Well, here you have to pay for transportation every day. You have to pay for food every day. You have to pay for all the books. You have to pay for all the uniforms, because here every school wears uniforms. And so that was just eye-opening for me. And I guess, something that us as Americans take for granted, that school is a given, where here is more of a privilege, right? So here, like to give you an example, when I went to go enroll my son in the school, they looked at his report card because it wasn't good. I'm gonna just be real with you. And they were like, I don't know. Like they really was not about to admit him into school because school is a privilege here. And so they were like, we'll give it a chance, we'll give it a try. He just needs to make sure he keeps up with his work, blah, blah, blah. If not, they have no problem with kicking you out. And so, yeah, so that's why like school here is taken way more seriously than it is in the States, in my opinion. And then also the food, like fortunately here in Jamaica, the land is.
Before you go to the food,
Ahead.
Let me ask you a quick question.
Yes.
Your son's school, is it public, private? Is everything private?
No, it's a public school. This is how public schools operate.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. We're not even stepping into the private game. Like this is just public school.
So how does he like it so far?
He loves it so far. I asked him the other day, I said, how is school? He's like, good. I was like, do you have any friends? He's like, yeah, I got 17. I said, that is very specific, but I'm glad that you have 17 friends. And they actually going on a field trip this week. I love the school here because in all the books, it's all Black faces. And that's just so very important, in my opinion, just to see Black faces represented everywhere. And, even with his classmates, it's all Black faces for the most part. And how they're learning things is also better, in my opinion. So like the curriculum here. So for instance, they're not using Common Core math where in the States they are. And it just goes all the way around the world to get to the same answer as doing it way more simple. So, yeah. And being that my son was diagnosed with ADHD back in the States, he wasn't excelling in school. He was getting by fine, but he wasn't excelling. And I understand because if you're already neurodivergent and they have you going all the way around the world to get to where you need to be, then of course, it's not really set up for that. Right. And then also with the school, so I went over the Black faces. They always have homework, even on the weekend, because like I said, school is taken very seriously. There's a lot of communication between the teacher and the parents. They have, here's another thing I like, which I haven't experienced yet, but I've heard good things. When they have field day, so you know how in the States, when there's field day, it's like a regular day for the kids. They go, they play, whatever. Right. Here, it's like a whole family community affair. So like you go, like all the parents go, all the family members go, and you rooting on your kid and, all of this stuff. And I was like, no wonder Jamaicans are so good at sports and stuff, because there's so much put on that at a young age. They're
more active.
Yeah, they're more active. And that's another thing too with school. And I know I'm going on, but
I'm really excited to hear all this.
Yeah. So another thing with school is they get like a full hour break. So to eat and play, and all that stuff, which in the States is like they try to fit everything into like 30 minutes. You know what I'm saying? So the kids are trying to rush to eat so they can go to play. Then they only playing for like 10, 15 minutes before they have to get back into class. Here, it's like, they prioritize that break time. And they also get another break where they can go get snacks from off campus if they want to, whatever. So it's just a more, I would say, free flowing school experience.
And so has your son's ADHD changed at all while he's been there, or?
A lot. And I say not only the curriculum, but also the kids here aren't on tablets and computers all day, every day. That's what they were doing in the States, right? Everybody get a computer, everybody get a tablet, whatever. And so here is like when we went to school, they got a blackboard, they got their notebook, they have to write down everything. And so my son's concentration has improved, his handwriting has improved, his behavior has improved. Like so many things have improved just as a result of the environment change.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Wow. So everything is a plus. So it sounds like you're not coming back at all.
Never. I mean, God willing, but I have no plans whatsoever of moving back to the States. Like, I feel like once you get a taste of what life is like, and I can only speak from my Black experience, right? Once you get a taste of what life is like outside, it's like, why would I subject myself to that anymore? Like, when I tell my neighbors here about the levels of racism and stuff that we experienced there, like for instance, when my article went viral, I'm getting, comments and all types of stuff. People saying, "Oh, good, we didn't want you here anyway. You should have took Kamala with you." All types of stuff. This was around election time, and when I tell my neighbors that, they're like, "What? Like that's how it?" I'm like, "Yes," and for us as Americans, it's so ingrained and so normal. Like we have normalized this stuff. When other people, they're like, "Whoa, like that's crazy."
I mean, part of us in our assimilation to become Americans or become Americanized, because I would debate you all, or a lot of people were not really American, but that's a whole other thing. But people love to be American, and I get it, and that's their right. But I think that there's something to saying, I just want to stay and be a part of the trauma over and over and over again. So I'm glad to see that. I'm glad your children are getting to grow up in a Black nation. I mean, obviously, I'm sure there's some vestiges left over from England or the UK, but it's got to be something to have. I'm assuming all the teachers are Black. Most of your shop owners are Black. Nobody's going to run up and say, "I hate you because you're Black." There's something to that. And I believe there's a higher level of humanity that you're able to experience when you don't have to deal with racism in that way.
Absolutely. And, one thing I've noticed, because I've filled out quite a few forms, whether it was government agencies or private, companies or whatever, I've never had to check that I was Black here.
Of course, it doesn't matter.
Right. Nobody cares. Which is another thing that we have become so accustomed to in the States, where you have to identify with almost every form you fill out, you have to identify. And so that was something that was different here. And, and then also the money, like just everything has our face on it. And I just really enjoy that being here for sure.
He's really got his own money. I'm thinking about the scene from Coming to America. It's like he's really got his own money. So I was going through the article trying to find the comments. I don't see any. I'm sure I'll find them later. It's probably not even that big of a deal. But again, it's funny. People will tell you to go back to wherever, right? But Black people built this country, along with Chinese, along with Native Americans, but we did a lion's share of the work. We did a lion's share of the work. But it's funny that you can tell people really don't understand history or choose to intentionally ignore history. And I guess that's the whole CRT or anti-CRT movement. It's almost like America does not want anyone, Black, white, green, or yellow, to be educated, understand history, or anything else.
Because if they do, like let's say they put real history into the curriculum, do you know how empowering that would make people? That will empower people, and they don't want to do that because too many people benefit from the history as it's being taught right now. So why would they want to change that? And that's why you have to being in that system, you have to make the conscious decision to educate yourself outside of what's taught in the schools, some of the real history, because then you start realizing, oh, like even read, like for instance, I read critical race theory last year as part of my program I was in, working on my PhD. And when I say some of the concepts in there, I said, like I didn't even think about it like that. But that's because that's not how the system is not designed to have us thinking like that, in my opinion.
Can you share one of those things that blew your mind when you were reading about it? Let me say this real quick though. Okay. For anybody who is confused about CRT, critical race theory, it is not taught in elementary, middle school, or high school. It's literally a grad school thing. Like Tiffany just said, she learned it when she was going for her PhD. And that's the one thing that boggles my mind, that everybody's like up in arms about this. But 5-year-old Timmy is not going to be reading about CRT. But okay. But I'm sorry. Go ahead. Tell us something that blew your mind about in CRT research.
Yeah. So, okay. So one thing to also point out is that CRT is not just about black-white stuff. You know what I'm saying? It's looking at the whole scope of race itself. And so one thing I read in there that I had to start checking myself on was, to give you an example, calling people Hispanic. Okay. Now, when you get into CRT, you start realizing, okay, Hispanic ties them to Spain, which was their oppressor. So some people don't like the term Hispanic. And I never thought about that. You know what I'm saying? It just never crossed my mind to think of things in that way, to think of things deeper than surface level, you know, because you just think, oh, Hispanic, non-Hispanic, you know, whatever. But really, there's a deeper level to that you can get into. And so that was one of the things that I read about in CRT that's coming to the top of the head. That I was just like, oh, like, you know, it's something seemingly so simple. However, it can have a whole different connotation depending. So
yeah, no, and that's a big one, right? But there's something I always say: nobody wants people in the United States to have a global mindset or global mind frame. Because again, that might change the whole landscape. And when you look at that, you know, a lot of times we are taught to think about Black as being only a United States thing. But when you look at the work of Stephen Biko, who actually created the Black conscious movement, but nobody talks about that. He's from South Africa, for those who don't know, listening or watching. Look up a book called I Write What I Like. But we think Black is synonymous to the United States, which is crazy to me. And then so when you bring up the idea about Hispanic is tied to Spain, and that was the regular term that everybody went with, nobody wanted to push back against that. And now they're starting to discover that we didn't care about that because it had nothing to do with us. However, you could also argue that the biggest body of Black people in the Western Hemisphere are Afro-Latinos or Latinos. I always get confused on which one I'm supposed to use, right? But nobody wants to really think about that. And I find that really, really interesting. So it's like, okay, bring on CRT. We need more of it, you know, and just, I think it'll help us think more. Because race is a construct. I'll be the first one to admit that. But I will also be the first person to say they're using that construct to destroy or go to war with people that look like you and I. And by the way, I don't know if y'all noticed, Tiffany's been on here before. Her skin is glowing. You can tell it. She's been out in that sun, y'all. She's been out in that sun. But, you know, they don't care about people that are melanated. And it's really clear. And I know somebody's going to say, Kamari's bugging again. But
no,
you can really tell.
Let me tell you how you're not bugging, okay? Because what I've realized is not just living in a predominantly Black country, but also visiting predominantly Black countries. It's like there's certain things that's done to keep the people where they are, if that makes sense. So to give you an example, and let me talk about Jamaica while I'm here. Food, right? I already said that food is expensive. We know, if you listen to Kamari, you probably know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You need your basic necessities, and then maybe not, but you need your basic necessities.
I need to talk about that. Thank you. That's a great concept idea. Go on.
Glad I could help. Well, I won't go into the full thing here, but just realize that you need basic necessities met before you can reach your highest potential, right? So if they can prevent you from meeting your basic necessities, then you'll never get up to that highest, which is self-actualization, right? Your highest self. And so here, for instance, food is expensive. That's a basic necessity. So luckily, the land is full of resources. This is where I was going before, where the trees actually do something. So that's different than the US. You know, in the US, trees are just ornamental. They create leaves, they make you rake, you know, whatever. Here, they actually produce fruit. They have a function, most of them, right? And so luckily that's the case here. And then of course the ocean, you know, people fish, whatever. And so luckily the land is providing food and resources for the people. If it wasn't for that, then it would be very, very difficult for people to survive here with how much things are, okay? Because I'm coming from a perspective using US money, and it's expensive for me. So imagine how the locals feel, right? So that's one. Then also water here, right? So sometimes water just cuts off. Like it might be here one day, might be gone tomorrow. Now, you can have a tank on your house. Like I have a tank at my house where it catches water. So that way, if they do cut off the water, I can use the tank. But not everybody has that luxury. So now we're missing food and we're missing water. Now we get into shelter, right? So because, and I can only speak for Negril, it's a very touristy area. It's expensive to live here, especially for locals, and especially as more and more people, you know, are buying up places and things like that, it's getting more and more expensive. And so now it's food, water, and shelter that some people are struggling to get. And the same thing with the States, right? There's food deserts there, you know, all types of stuff. And so if you can't meet your basic necessities, how could you possibly think further than that? You know, if you don't have food to eat, you're thinking about how am I going to eat my next meal? You're not thinking about, oh, maybe I can start a business, or maybe I can do this, or maybe I can do that. You're trying to put food on your table. So sometimes, you know, you can get stuck at that first level of Maslow's hierarchy. And I feel like that is what happens in these majority melanated communities, is that there's a lot of things at play where people can't get to that higher level of self-actualization.
I would agree. I guess I need to put it in a picture of Maslow's hierarchy of needs now, because that's so real. And I think I might have done like one episode on it, because sometimes my stuff is a little esoteric. I know that, but I compared Maslow's hierarchy of needs to the financial planning chart. And so when you look at the financial planning chart, if you can visualize it in your mind, Maslow's hierarchy of needs are very similar in the way it's positioned. So maybe I need to revisit that. But Tiffany, I probably need to, I don't want to say pick your brain. Somebody told me a long time ago that's very colonizerous. But I probably need to sit down with you, because I've been struggling sending out my newsletter. And I actually need to do a newsletter for the Finance Rebel. I do one for a Philly tax team and the tax problem solver, but I haven't been consistent with it. I've been struggling.
As we all do. Like, don't think that I'm over here sending consistent newsletters every single week, like on time. I don't. But building that level of consistency though. You never know what might happen as as we
Right.
talked about earlier. So
Right. I mean, geez. Okay, so real quick, I want to take a quick detour, and I want to share Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Real quick, let me just find it. There it is. But I need Tiffany back. There she is. And so, as Tiffany talked about, psychological is the base. That's the foundation. Everybody needs that. Food, clothing, shelter. Next one being up is safety. If you're not safe, usually you're not able to thrive. You're not able to think about anything else. And then social, like human beings, forget race. Human beings are social beings. Whether you are extrovert or introvert, I see so many people get that wrong. I am an introvert, for the record. However, I do like people, y'all. Don't get it confused that, just because I'm an introvert and I just want to live in a cave all by myself. No, that's not what it's about. It's really about who you get power from. But all human beings are social. Some of us may not need as much as others, though. That's the thing about it, right? Then the next one up is self-esteem, which Tiffany talked about, right? And I'll read that. It says, once you've secured our social needs, our primal desires for status and self-esteem come into play. We want to feel not only part of the group, but an admired and respected part of the group. Right. And then the next one is self-actualization, which Tiffany was talking about. It's really hard for a lot of people to get to this level, the top level, the apex level. Right. And so it says, finally, now our core needs are met. We're ready to pursue our deepest desire for self-actualization, to become the most complete and authentic version of ourselves. With the fundamentals taken care of, we're free to act as we choose, align with our values and higher purpose. So this part, a lot of people will say is, the more artsy fartsy phase where people can experiment and be creative and not necessarily have the hustle and bustle, again, for their needs. But this is really good. And I would encourage anybody who's watching to really dig into Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, and let me add something. So I'm glad you pulled this up. So the physiological needs, right? Food, water, shelter, rest. Rest is what's missing in America most of the time.
And imagine I didn't say rest at all, but yes, thank you.
But that's usually what's missing there. That's what I've noticed. And so if they can keep you tired, if they can keep you so busy that you're burnt out at the end of the day, where let's say everything else is covered, then you'll still not get to that self-actualization because you don't have the capacity to do it. And so that's what I learned, especially on the last visit when I was there, with everybody I interacted with, they're like, oh, what you doing after this? What you doing after this? What you doing? What you doing? What you doing? And when it came to me, I was like, I don't know. Like, I might sit in my car for the next 30 minutes. I might go to the park. Like, I don't know. I'm just going with the flow, but everybody's on a schedule. You know what I'm saying? And that rest part is really where the magic happens, in my opinion. So, yeah, the physiological needs, including rest. I even made a post while I was up there. I said, if you're so busy, when do you have time to recharge? And someone commented, this was on Twitter. They commented, or X, I call it Twitter still, but somebody commented and said, oh, I block off between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. every day. And somebody else commented and said, oh, I do the same. And in my mind, I'm like, so we're excited about 1 hour of rest, 1 hour that we have to ourselves in a day out of 24. That's what we're excited about. Now, I'm glad that you have it. However, start thinking about that too. Like, that's only an hour that you have me time, that you're resting and allowing yourself to rest out of a full 24 in a day. So, and I feel like that awareness came after I unplugged.
So it's funny you bring that up. So you jog my memory. There's something that Baba Dick Gregory says about that. And actually, I just went and looked it up, and I want to share this real quick. And I think you could totally relate to this because you were just talking about this. But I want to share this real quick. Hopefully, I won't get any YouTube strikes. And of course, I need to get YouTube TV so I can not have to deal with these commercials.
Mm-hmm. I didn't realize it wasn't sugar. It wasn't a Twinkie. It wasn't about like it was enough of it.
You found and are writing about that are incurable.
Yes.
But you may have found the secret to a lot of the things that doctors cannot find cures for as it relates to many diseases out there, like cancer,
yes,
diabetes. Let's just talk about you as a nutritionist and some of the formulas that you found and are writing about that has been tried and proven to cure.
You know, you're kind of psychic. I put something in my little pouch that I was going to give you off the show for your health and your friends. And now you bring it up. All right, first let me go back my background. I thought that good nutrition for as long as what you like, it was enough of it. And bad nutrition is when it ran out. I mean, I come through St. Louis, Missouri, rigid racial segregation pattern, and inside you keep having this thing for sweetness. And I didn't realize till I got grown that sweetness you want is human dignity. I didn't realize it wasn't sugar, it wasn't a Twinkie, it wasn't a bottle of soda pop. And then to find out that one soda pop makes your bloodstream 10,000 times more acid than God meant for it to be. I was brought up believing that black folks was on the right side of God, you know. I didn't believe all white folks would go to hell, but I thought most of them would be there and all black folks would be in heaven. And then I started looking at the ankles swollen and the sugar diabetes.
Now, you kind of just brought up something about that, right? That's the other thing. I guess the universe wanted us to talk about politics today.
This in the high blood. This before I had stats. I mean, I could sit here now and tell you that African Americans is less than 12% of America's population. And yet, as we sit here now, 87% of everybody on kidney dialysis machines is black folks. There's something wrong with that number. They don't have one kidney dialysis machine in all of Africa now because they're too poor. They don't need them. Black men, less than 4% of America's population, 83% of prostate cancer death is black men. And then they tell us, well, you know what it is? You haven't been examined. You don't get checked. Hey, where they get checked in Africa? Where they get checked? If you understand what I'm saying? If me not going to the clinic, being checked, is the cause of it being so high, then when you go to Africa, you can go 5,000 miles and don't even see a little first aid center.
Not even a clinic.
You hear me? Mm-hmm. So then you say, let me throw that out the window. Young black teenage boys in America have more asthma deaths in 1 year than all the asthma deaths on this planet put together. Well, first, what we're not aware of yet, and the medical researchers haven't touched, is that 98% of what you die from basically starts from dehydration. So now what does this mean? It means that an asthma attack is like a drinking water. An asthma attack is the brain sends a message to squeeze the water out of the lungs. And most of the time, 6 quick glasses of water would kind of break that up. Now, why aren't black women, you know what I said, more black teenage boys die from asthma every year in America than all the asthma deaths on this planet? How about the women? Well, the black teenage boys is high because what they drink? Gatorade, soda pop, Kool-Aid, and lemonade.
Gatorade is not good for you.
Well, I'm not saying that. It can't substitute for water. Mm-hmm. You understand what I'm saying?
You have to drink water.
You know, look, oil is good for my car, but I don't put it in the gas tank. You have to drink water. The number one cause of death in America is not homicide or drugs or suicide. The number one death in America is sleep deprivation.
Lack of sleep.
Sleep deprivation.
So how much sleep does the body require?
The universal order requires that you must be in bed 90 minutes after the sun go down to get the brain recharged after 12 midnight. You know the story Cinderella? She's not back in the house by midnight. She turns into a pumpkin. After midnight.
Now, when does the sun go down?
It changes. It goes down different every day.
What's the average time it goes down?
It varies. In the summertime, it goes
What
down.
about the wintertime now?
Well, in the wintertime, it's your shortest. In the wintertime, if the sun, let's say if the sun was down at 5:30, you got 90 minutes before you go to bed.
Now, that's phenomenal, right? When you think about that. And what Tiffany was talking about was, you know, we Black people not getting enough rest. And there you have it. Baba Dick Gregory says the same thing many, many years ago, right? So this interview came out in 2002. And so many times people just negate many of these things, water, sleep, and knowing what good nutrition is. So you got to think about these things and just know that everything that's been set up here isn't necessarily for the best use of us. When you look at the medical recommendations for food, milk is one of them. Milk is not good for any human being. I know you drink it. I know you might like it, but it's not necessarily good for anybody. So I want you to keep that in mind.
But I loved that video, and I was still listening, and I grabbed this as well. This is the medicine here.
Are those herbs?
Yes, it's herbs and all types. So this is how people heal themselves here.
Okay,
So
wait a minute, what is that?
Oh gosh, here we go. Because I'm like, all right. So this is bay leaf. We have bay leaf there.
Okay.
Turmeric.
Okay.
Dang, what was this called? Of course, you would have to put me on the spot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're fine. But the point is, right? This got delivered to my door. Like the herb guy came by, and he had a whole bunch of stuff, and he's like, okay, this is what I have. This is what does this. This is da, 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 da. And then that is the medicine here. Like, you know, when I first moved down here, whenever we would get sick or whatever, I'm like, oh, I got to go to the doctor. I got to go to the doctor. They like, Tiffany, you don't have to go. But it's just, that's how we've been conditioned and programmed, is that with every single ailment, we have to go to the doctor. And
Right.
So what I've learned since I've been here is to, you know, DG's point is that the places like this, medicine is here, don't get me wrong, but it's not as prevalent as it is in the States. And so to his point, when he's like, oh yeah, you got to get checked out for this and checked out for that, the people here don't do that. Now, if it's something, you know, major, serious, whatever, of course they go to the doctor. But for little stuff like colds, my daughter had a cold. My neighbors bought peppermint to make peppermint tea. They bought, you know, the onions in the socks thing, you know, all types of stuff. And that's what they rely on, and the good food.
So I believe in both, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just to be clear, what DG's saying, what Baba Dick's saying, there's some truth to that. However, there's nuance to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are a lot of people, a lot of times, that will get colon cancer,
Mm-hmm.
breast cancer, whatever, because they don't get checked.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, you still need to get checked. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, no, of course not. But however, you know how, for instance, COVID and stuff was going on up there not too long ago, you know, making its rounds again. I was telling my people here, I was like, oh yeah, COVID's going on in the States. They're like, what? Like nobody really. And even when I went up there to visit recently, it was like everybody was sick. And I'm like, hardly anybody's sick here, you know, that I know of. And so I don't know, it's just really interesting seeing the differences, I think, when it comes to health stuff.
I mean, because you have the best medicine ever, right? Nutrition, what do they always say? Let thy food be thy medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And you were also telling me that you have a pretty active lifestyle because you have to walk to and fro.
Mhm.
Or, like all of those things matter.
Mhm.
I'm guilty of this too, y'all. So I'm not sitting here pointing down because I drive my car everywhere I go. Or I
Mhm.
walk more. It's just better for you. You know, a lot of people think, the big powerlifters are the healthiest people in the world. There was a study, and I need to go find it, but many years ago, they said the most healthiest person, occupation wise, was the mailman. Carried
Mhm.
roughly a 50 to 90 pound sack, and they walked, I forget how many miles a day,
Mhm.
maybe 20, but
So
they were active.
yeah, my grandpa retired from being a mailman and he's in his 70s and he's still going like like he's doing really well, but I feel like that's part of it, for pretty much the majority of his life, because he started being a mailman when he was, I think he said 18, 19, and then he retired from that. So it's like 30, 40 plus years, you walk in every single day, all day. And so as a result, he still gets up early, he's still moving around, he's still active. And so that definitely plays a part, but also culturally, right? So culturally in the States, everybody has a car. Everywhere is a drive-through. Everywhere, is more conducive to a lifestyle like that. Even if you don't have a car, you're getting in someone else's car, or it's not as like here. Of course they have taxis, don't get me wrong, they have public transportation and stuff too, but people are walking, they're just walking more. So yeah, it's definitely a culture thing. Because here's another thing I realized: nobody's outside really. Like, people are either in their car, they're in the house, or they're in the building, right? So you don't really see people just out on the street like that, at least in North Carolina, where I'm from,
Right,
right?
right.
And so here, there's people everywhere all the time. It doesn't matter if it's late at night, early in the morning, during the day, there's people out and about all the time. So I think, that also adds to it as well.
I would agree. And I mean, I think
Mhm.
science says the same thing, but we're going against science. So now we're getting people being more obese. Um, there's some studies that say this generation is going to live less, or going to live a shorter time frame than the previous generation before. So we're going backwards. So yeah, and you would have to assume that too much cell phone, too much tablet, not enough outside. Kids don't want to go outside anymore. Adults aren't walking as much.
Mhm.
Yeah, all that stuff matters. All that stuff
And
matters.
and like I said at the beginning, I'm 33 years old, 32 at the time, and I'm dealing with high blood pressure and heart issues and all types of stuff. And not too long before I moved, maybe like a month or so before I moved, somebody that was 32, that was a friend of a friend, had passed away from a heart attack suddenly, you know? And so that was like, yeah, like, this is my wake up call. Like, that could have been me, you know what I'm saying? And I'm just like, I would rather take my chances somewhere else and see if it's a better health outcome. And also, a turning point for me was watching that documentary on Netflix about the blue zones.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that. Blue
Oh
zones.
man, yeah,
What
definitely
is
look
that?
at that. So blue zones are places in the world where people are living past 100. Like, a lot
Oh,
of people are living past 100.
like Japan is one of the blue zones, I
Mm-hmm.
believe.
Like, it's a few places all over the world. But in the documentary, one of the stories was like, this guy, he grew up in a place that was a blue zone. He moved to the States because, everybody want to go to the States because they feel like it's a better place to live, and lived there for a while, ended up getting diagnosed with cancer. And
Mm.
so they were like, oh, you only have like 2 or 3 years left. So he's like, shoot, if I only have 2 or 3 years, then I'm going to move back, to where I'm from. Right. And, just live out the rest of my days. Do you know he ended up living for like another 10, 20 years? I don't remember exactly, but he ended up living for quite a long time after that. And so
Wow,
that's when I was like,
there's something
like,
to this.
that is very interesting.
Mm.
So definitely, I highly recommend checking that out. Hopefully, it's still on Netflix. They be changing stuff up, but I had watched it. I want to say it was the end of last year,
Well, I found it, so I'm going to bring it up. I mean, I think this would be a good place for us to end talking about this. So we have the Blue Zones. Let me bring it up here. So United States, Loma Linda, Costa Rica, Italy, Greece, Japan. So I said Japan earlier. But I believe also some of the Samoan Islands might be considered those or close to it.
Shoot, I might even add because there's a lot of people here that are just thriving. Like for instance, one of my neighbors, he's like 60 or so, and he'd be doing backflips, front flips, all types of stuff. So climbing trees, like everything. So I'm like, and even if you just go into town, you'll see older people still walking, still, whatever. So it's not like in the States where most of the elderly are like sitting still, staying put with walkers. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a walker here, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. I don't know.
Interesting. That's interesting.
It's very interesting. I just thought about that. I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen a walker or even a wheelchair here on the street. I mean, I'm just thinking about that now. It's just interesting. But anyway, just the active lifestyle is definitely important.
Okay. Well, one thing we didn't get a chance to talk about is what you needed to do to prepare to transition from North Carolina to Jamaica, but I know we're short on time. So if you could just let everybody know, I'm being selfish right now, y'all. What should people think about who want to become digital nomads, who may want to, I don't know, maybe live somewhere else, but at least started to experience other places for maybe a potential point to relocate? What would you say to that?
Yeah. So if you're thinking about relocating and being an expat, regardless of where you go, if it's Jamaica, if it's somewhere else, I did do a podcast episode about that, and I can make sure you get the link or what have you. But of course, there's things you want to think about, like the legalities, visas and citizenship and budget. I'm really big on budgets and stuff like that. Is super important. But I will say, at least in my case, the biggest possible barrier I could have had was myself and my mind and my thoughts and fear, because I kid you not, this was the scariest thing I've ever did in my life. And even up until the day I was leaving, I was like, oh my gosh, am I making a good decision or what have you? But I did it anyway. And that really, it was life-changing in so many different ways, life-saving in so many different ways, right? And so I feel like getting out of the belief or fear factor, I feel, is the biggest part. Whether you decide that you want to just go somewhere new, do an extended stay. I mean, you don't have to move. You could do like an extended stay, or even just visit, whatever it is. I think getting past that fear factor. And unfortunately, there are different things that play on that fear factor. Like when I moved, the US had just upgraded Jamaica travel advisory. I think it was like a level 3, level 4, whatever. And so I was like, oh, shoot. So I texted my friends down here. I'm like, they was like, it's fine. And so I think getting past that fear factor is huge. But secondly, definitely budget and making sure that you can afford wherever it is that you're trying to stay. And getting started with that, even if you don't want to move, even just doing it now, and getting an idea of what it takes for you to currently live, I think is super important and super empowering, because even I've used that to quit corporate. I've used that to now move to another country. It definitely plays a part in decision making, and figuring out what's best for you.
Wow. Well, Tiffany, thank you for spending time with us. I need you back more, though. So, I need you back more. So, but, I'll beg you later on. I'll figure out another way. I'll trick you in to come on more. But no, I appreciate you being on. I appreciate you sharing your experience. I pray and hope that this will be helpful to someone else who watches it. It's definitely been helpful to me. So I truly appreciate you and thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And real quick, you can find me at Money Talk with T on all social media channels. I have a little addiction with that. I'm trying to get out of it though.
I was coming to it though, but you baby, go ahead.
And then Money Talk with Tiff is the podcast, and then moneytalkwitht.com is the blog. So you can find me on all of those places.
Okay. And moneytalkwitht.com is where they can find the blog.
Correct.
All right. And I will link all those things up in the show notes, the YouTube, the podcast, and all the above. So, Tiff, thank you again. I appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching the podcast, The Finance Rebel Show. And I will talk to you all again soon. If you have any questions about traveling abroad or being an expat, make sure you put them in the comment section. And I'll see if I can trick Tiffany to come back and answer some of those. But again, I'll see you all later.
Thank you for having me.